under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we're going to move right into the adoption of the agenda.
I move for the adoption of the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, we've got a motion by Council Member Osborne and a second by the Vice Mayor. Clerk, please call the roll.
Farnham.
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Osborne.
Yes.
Pollard.
Yes.
Nave.
Yes. All right, so we'll go right into the called meeting agenda, which is our budget workshop. And I see that Mr. Eads is already ready to go, and so we'll pass it on to you.
All right, well, good morning, council. Thanks for being here today. Today is our first and only budget workshop for this year's budget season. We'll be presenting the budget on April the 9th, but before we get into that, just kind of a little bit of how we will go through things today. We'll go over the process and schedule that we've been through so far. We'll talk about council budget goals. Then we'll discuss revenue items, debt service, capital funds, road and infrastructure projects, fleet rotation, and facilities maintenance. So the purpose is to receive feedback during the budget development process and to communicate where we are at this point in time. The budget remains a working document throughout the process based on historical data, trends, and projections. We have a format for questions and comments today, and public comment will be received at regularly scheduled council meetings. So March 12th, we had the non-mandated outside agency request in the Bristol, Virginia Public Schools here. March 16th, it's today, we'll talk about taxes, debt, department requests, salaries, and benefits. April 9th will be the budget presentation. As I mentioned at this meeting this past week, we will also have the tax rate resolution on April the 9th as well. I do not anticipate in my budget raising or lowering the real estate tax rate at this time. April 13th will be the advertisement for the fiscal year 25 budget. May the 14th will be the first reading of the budget ordinance, and May 28th will be the second reading of the budget ordinance. And pursuant to Virginia Code 15.2-2503, the governing body shall prepare and approve a budget for informative and fiscal planning purposes only, containing a complete and itemized and classified plan of all contemplated expenditures and all estimated revenues and borrowings for the locality for the ensuing fiscal year. The itemized contemplated expenditures shall include any discretionary funds to be designated by individual members of the governing body and the specific uses and funding allocation planned for those funds by the individual member. So now we'll talk about budget goals. Several council members stated they wanted to either keep or reduce the trash rate, and also several council members said keep the real estate taxes the same. We had one council member suggest that we increase the firefighter ALS stipend and add one firefighter position to balance the shifts. Several council members said increase the number of police officer positions by 4 designated to work specifically in downtown. One council member suggested adding an economic development director position. One council member suggested fund the increase request by the school board in their proposed budget. One council member suggested a budget for a separate city attorney. Several council members talked about streets, intersections, and sidewalk updates. One council member suggested reform the city permits, which I think would pertain to animal permits and other types of permits throughout the city, zoning permits and things of that nature. Next was implement a policy that vehicles, cars, trucks, and buses will be replaced with electric vehicles. And finally, allocate money for updates to downtown decor and improvements to Cumberland Square Park. So those were the council budget goals as we went through this past week and a half, as you all got those back to me. Next, we'll go ahead and start talking about revenues. And so this is where the rubber meets the road as it relates to our budget. What money do we have coming in so that we know what money we can have going out? And we have several taxes that we need to consider as we go through this budget year. And the first and foremost is the real estate taxes. In 2024 budget, we were at $13.5 million. In 2025, we are estimating at $13.9 million, and that is mainly due to the increase in what we believe the assessments will be for this past year and for projects that are currently ongoing. and that's an increase of $413,000. Delinquent taxes, we reduced that by $200,000 this past, or for this upcoming budget year. Current taxes on the real property in DRI 1 is $280,000, an increase of $24,062. Current taxes on DRI 2 and 3, an increase of $21,728. And the PSC current property taxes, a decrease of $209,000. And I'd also say that these taxes are based on what we're seeing based on actuals. Personal property current taxes, we've increased that by $593,000 based on actuals that we are seeing. Personal property delinquent taxes, there's no change. PPTRA current taxes, no change. Current taxes, personal property, an increase of about $1,900. That was at DRI 1. DRI 2 and 3, an increase of $19,000. Next, penalties, we left the same at $181,000. Interest, we decreased by $29,000, and that's based on actuals that we're seeing. Based on interest rates, we did have good interest rates this past year and a half or so, and they have seemed to stabilize a little bit. The tax administration fee, we decreased by $14,000. Local sales and use tax, we've decreased by $188,000. Consumer utility tax, we've increased by $9,000. Business license tax, we've increased by $78,000. Motor vehicle license tax, an increase of $5,200. Bank stock taxes, a decrease of $58,000. Taxes on recordation and wills decreased by $82,000. And cigarette taxes, we've talked about that in our quarterly updates. We've seen significant decrease in cigarette taxes, and we decreased that by $117,000. Lodging taxes, we've increased $216,000 to $3.1 million based on actuals. Restaurant meals tax, we've talked about this in our quarterly updates. That has been decreased by $343,000. The electric consumption tax has stayed the same, and the admissions tax has increased by roughly $9,000. Local sales and use tax in DRI 1 has stayed the same at $484,000. Restaurant meals tax in DRI 1 increase of $49,000 to $900,500. Business license tax in DRI 1 increase of $32,900. Local sales and use tax, DRI 2 and 3, an increase of $32,000. Restaurant meals tax in DRI 2 and 3, an increase of $183,000. Business license taxes in DRI 2 and 3, an increase of $19,500. Interest on bank deposits, an increase of $187,200. Interest on investments, $199,000 increase. State sales tax at the DRI 1, an increase of $15,000. And state sales tax, DRI 2 and 3, a decrease of $32,000. So that is it with our revenues. I'll just kind of pause here for a second to see if there's any questions as it relates to our revenues.
Where are the general permits and stuff fall?
These are what you're seeing here are the taxes that are the biggest chunk of our budget. We don't add and have never included those permits in this presentation.
Too small?
Yes, just too small. Okay, while the revenues seem to stay steady, some changes that do concern us. Now we're getting ready to get into things that are not too pretty. So here's our general obligation debt prior to this year and how our funding was going to go for the general obligation debt. As you can see, in 2022 and 2023, we had debt service of $6.9 million, and we needed $539,000 to fund that. We came up with that, and then in 23-24, we were able to use the revenue sharing to help offset some of that, plus use reserve funds that we had to cover the deficit, and we did not need to come up with any funds until the 2028 budget cycle. based on our current debt schedule. And this is getting ready to change significantly. Now, this is based on interim financing. As you can see, in 2024, we did not need any extra funding because we used committed reserve funds. In 24-25, we have interest payment of $767,750 that will be due. We will use reserve funds of $1.4 million, so no extra funding would be needed. However, as we go into the 25 and 26 budget cycle, you can see we will need an extra $1 million to cover our debt service, and it will jump to $8.9 million in 2024, 2025. In 2026, 2027, we'll need $2.2 million to cover the debt service, and then in 27, 28, you see that there's $32 million there that is funding that we need. That $32 million will be based on whether or not we have to refinance our debt or whether or not we have another revenue source that will help offset that debt. So there is a possibility that $32 million would have to be refinanced. And then in 2028 and 2029, we would need $801,000 to cover the debt. So we have significant debt payments increase over the next several years, and that's something that we have to be mindful for as we continue through our budget processes. I won't say it's a dire situation right now, but we are as close to a dire situation as you can possibly get without being in a dire situation. Now, let's look at how our debt plays out in the event we do have funding that would offset the debt. And you can see here, most numbers stay the same, except you can look at 27 and 28. We would need $1.5 million instead of the $32 million to come up with to cover our debt limits or debt obligations, and in the following year, $801,000. So I'll stop here and see if there's any questions in regards to our debt.
Is that roughly $1.5 million in interest on the bond anticipation notes?
On the
bond anticipation notes, because it jumped up for this year, then it drops back down after the ban.
Yes, because the payment on those debts is not level, so it will fluctuate up and down as you go through the process. And Ms. Spradlin may have some more.
Yes, the 1.5 is what the interest on the ban added to the debt service annual requirements.
After the 28-29 year, that amount of 7.5, is that roughly what that amount is through like 2043, 2044?
I'm not sure on that debt schedule.
It evens, it stays around there. It goes up a little bit, but it hovers right around 7.6, yes. And that was the purpose years ago when we refinanced, was to get us an even schedule that we could get to and meet.
But if we refinance the ban like we're probably going to have to do, then we can look forward to roughly another $1.5 million in debt service for a long period of time, right?
Be longer.
Actually, we'd have to add capital or the principal to that, because that's just interest.
Correct. It would be more than the 1.5.
More like 2.5.
All right. Next, we'll jump into some of our capital projects with infrastructure that we have going on here in the city. These are our projects that Public Works has scheduled to do and complete in 24-25. The one thing that I'd like for everyone to take away from this is we are using very little local dollars to do significant infrastructure projects in the state or in the city, with a lot of federal and state funding, with the majority of that being state funding. So we have street and drainage improvements of $75,000. Those are local funds that we will use for that. The Lee Highway Exit 5 Phase B off-ramps, that's state funding of $6.5 million, local funding of $40,717, for a total project cost of $6.6 million. The Lee Highway Shared Use Path from Overhill Road to Clover Lane is all state funding of $289,000. The shared use path from Overhill to Shipley Drive is $202,000 from the state, $50,694 from the city, for a total of $253,470. The Goodson Street Bridge replacement is all state funded at $569,000 for this year. The Piedmont ped heads on State Street in Piedmont, that's $406,570, all federal funding this year. The Paulina Drive sidewalk, federal funding of $283,000. Martin Luther King Bridge, state funding of $163,832 this year. And the Oak Street Bridge of state funding, $604,843 this year. So you can see our project totals are $9,261,000. Local funding, $166,411. State funding of $8.4 million. And federal funding of $689,000. And we'll break these down going forward in 25-26. We have street and drainage improvements. We're always going to have $75,000 in street and drainage improvements in the budget for that. Goodson Street Bridge of $2.5 million of state funding. Martin Luther King Bridge of $2.2 million of state funding. The Oak Street Bridge of $3.8 million for state funding, a total of $8.6 million for state funding for these projects on a total project cost of $8.74 million in the 25-26 budget cycle. State maintenance funded projects reported in the general fund, and these projects will be budgeted as funding is available for each year. Euclid Avenue drainage improvements, $956,250. Public Works aggregate storage, $109,000. Public Works equipment topsoil storage, $150,000. The Reservoir Street drainage improvements, $93,750. Piedmont, Fox Meadows, Glenway drainage of $1.2 million. Crockett Street drainage improvements of $521,000. Goodson Street and William Street drainage improvements, $327,000. Downtown parking improvements on Lee Street, $300,000. Downtown parking improvements on Cumberland Street of $500,000. Valley Drive and Green Hill Road drainage improvements, $625,000. Osborne Street drainage improvements, $60,000. Second Taylor Street and Hayden Street improvements of $1.1 million for a total project cost of $5.9 million. So those will be funded as funds are available in the year.
Can I ask you on that?
Sure.
Do we identify which areas we need this, or is this all done through the state?
We identify these areas,
Okay,
and they have a schedule. Public Works has a schedule as to when these things should be done. A lot of these drainage improvements haven't been done for years, and they need to be updated as soon as possible.
yeah. Okay, thanks.
Local capital funding plan. Our goal as we go through this budget process going forward, we would like to use 3%, roughly 3% of our budget for local capital projects. And I think as we go through this process, you'll see why we think that's a sufficient number. Obviously, we would like to use more, but based on the situation we're in, we think 3% is a healthy number. So in the fiscal year 25, local capital projects that will be expended would be $309,000. Local vehicles is $690,000 for a total of $999,000, which is roughly 1.5% of our budget. In fiscal year 26, we will have local capital projects of $1.2 million, local vehicle of $690,000 for a total of $1.9 million. In fiscal year 27, we will increase the capital a little bit to $1.6 million. Once again, local vehicles is $690,000 for a total of $2.3 million, which is 3.64% of the budget. And for fiscal year 28, $1.1 million in local capital projects. Local vehicle, we've increased that to $890,000. for a total of $2 million, which is 3.14% of the budget. And then in fiscal year '29, $1.2 million in local capital projects, local vehicles, $890,000 for a total of $2.1 million, which is 3.22% of the budget. So now we'll talk about the capital improvement plan. These are projects that department heads submitted this past winter as capital projects that they need for their departments. We had a committee of about 7 individuals that went through and scored these projects. Based on the situation that we're in, we scored heavily on whether or not it was public safety related or whether it was legally required for us to do it. So as you can see, as we go through these projects, the projects that you see at the front of the years here in 25, 26, 27 are more public safety related. And then as we go further along, you can see projects that may not be quite as public safety related. And there were also some projects that did not score to even get on the funding plan as of right now. So in '25, we will have $42,000 going to firefighter personal protective equipment. We will have this in the budget every year going forward so that firefighters can get the equipment that they need for personal protective equipment. Ballistic helmets, $18,000. That was for the sheriff's office. Courthouse entry doors, ADA accessibility, $11,000. Body armor replacement, body armor replacement was for the sheriff's office. That was 17 body armor units they needed for $18,530. And then the fire station alerting system of $220,000. In 2026, once again, you have firefighter personal protective equipment. They also need the fire department needs a new air compressor in order to refill their tanks. The compressor they have has significant age on it, and it will hopefully last us another year, and this will allow them to fill their tanks. And I do know that Bristol, Tennessee, is that right, Chief, uses air compressor sometimes to fill their tanks as well. Then we will also include an advanced life support ambulance in 2026 of $305,000. And then you all are aware of the issues at Gene Malcolm Stadium. There are no plans for any updates in the fiscal year '25 for Gene Malcolm Stadium. However, in fiscal year '26, we are planning to start doing some revamping of Gene Malcolm Stadium of $850,000. So in 2026, there's $1.2 million of locally funded projects. 2027, $42,000 once again for firefighter personal protective equipment. And then the Gene Malcolm Stadium takes up the bulk of our capital projects that year of $1.6 million. Gene Malcolm will have to be funded over the course of really 3 fiscal years, as you can see on the right one. Hold on, messed up. Over 2 fiscal years for those projects. In 2028, once again, firefighter personal protective equipment. In-car cameras and interview room modernization for the police department of $803,000. The Randolph Fieldhouse, increase of $150,000. Treasurer's office city vehicle of $43,000. Blue light towers for public areas. These are the lights that you see that people can hit and press if they need help, $97,000. Municipal surveillance technology expansion of $29,000 for a total of $1.1 million. In 2029, once again, firefighter personal protective equipment. The third base bleachers and locker rooms on the Randolph Field of $750,000. Cumberland Square Park fencing of $100,000. Paving the gravel lot at the animal shelter, $50,000. Sugar Hollow Park Technology and Safety Project, $43,918. 3 new patrol vehicles for the Sheriff's Department of $120,000. And then upgrading and replacing 20-year-old fencing at the 3 ball fields at Sugar Hollow Park, $113,520.
What is, in 2028, what is municipal surveillance technology?
That is a system of cameras that would go in certain places throughout the city for safety reasons.
But it's not, I know some big cities have put in like audio monitoring to pick up ballistic?
I know it's not that.
Okay. Thank you.
So you can see our total capital projects are at $5.6 million. So I'll stop there for any questions before we get into solid waste.
Just a few questions. Well, I'm excited to see all the capital projects because stuff we need to do, and years ago, whenever 7, 10 years ago, it just seemed like there maybe even wasn't a plan back then, and we've got a plan now, so that's good. I'm excited to see the stuff about Gene Malcolm. We've talked about that for a while. In fiscal year 26, there was the ambulance.
Yes.
Is that replacing the current ambulance?
That would be
we've got?
replacing the current ambulance. We hope at some point to get the ambulance in the fleet rotation and take it out of capital and have it in fleet rotation, but we're not at that point yet.
Okay.
I'm glad to see some of the street projects like the Goodson Street Bridge, which has been an eyesore for a long time, but I like seeing the longer-term plans that is not being ignored. We just can't do it right now.
Right.
Are you going to send us this? That way we
Yeah,
see-
we'll send this out to you Monday.
And I believe if you look at this is in that.
Oh, I
packet.
may have it. Never mind. Sunil's a step ahead of me.
On the,
I like electronic copies.
on the Oak Street Bridge project,
Yes.
so that bridge has been shut down for several years, right? So is the plan to take it out or to repair it and reopen it, or?
I think the plan is to take that bridge out.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Take it out.
Take it out. I'll double check on that, but that was the plan previously.
I think it's also important to note, I love seeing all of the capital improvement projects as well. Hopefully, in just researching and talking to our lawmakers at the federal level, I'm hoping that we can get some funding that we can possibly even move some of these up, into another year, like even next year, if we could get some additional funding, which would allow us then to add even more projects to this.
Yeah, if
Free
we
up some
can, if we
funding.
can use federal funds to get to some of these projects sooner, then that allows us to do local projects sooner.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this is great. I know it's been commented already, we've kind of, for too long, just not really had that long-term plan for some of these things. It seems like we've jumped from bad situation to bad situation, so having a 5-year plan, looking forward to do some big things in the city is very refreshing, and I think it's a good place to be right now.
Well, and this is to Ms. Spradlin's credit. When we came on board, I don't think there was a capital improvement plan at all, and then she put together a capital improvement committee 2018, 19, somewhere in there. Then last year, we did not have a capital improvement plan that we presented, and so we're getting back on that this year. All right, solid waste items that were not in the capital plan. These are things that are necessary out at the landfill. One, the solid waste air compressor building improvements, that's $350,000. And those air compressors are for the purpose of pushing gas through the system. The solid waste maintenance facility, a $350,000 project. A solid waste tipping floor repairs and improvements of $361,000. A solid waste tub grinder, that would be for brush, is $1.1 million. And a solid waste belling room improvements of $875,000. There's various reasons as to why these are not in the capital plan. I think we have to determine what our long-term plan is with some of these projects, or whether or not they'll ever actually be necessary. But we do want to let you all know that these are items that may be necessary at some point in the future in the solid waste department. So I'll just, if there's any questions about any of those before we move on to fleet rotation. All right. So fleet rotation, These are the things that people see more on a daily basis than they do a lot of things that we have here in the cities. Police vehicles, we are budgeting $600,000 for 8 new police vehicles. We will lease a pumper truck, and that's a $90,000 a year lease. An on-call vehicle for fleet that allows them to come out, take care of things after hours for their on-call services and bring equipment with them of $60,000. A pool vehicle, that is a vehicle for City Hall and other employees in order to travel throughout the state whenever travel is necessary, of $55,000. Parks and Rec operations, 2 Kubota tractors for $47,050. And then Parks and Rec programming, an SUV for $38,000. That would replace an SUV that my guess is probably at least 20 years old. And then here, fleet rotation solid waste requests that were not in a fleet rotation. Brush truck in 2026 of $215,000. A dump truck in 2026 of $75,000. A leaf truck in 2027 of $310,000. And then annual requirements of $400,000.
Question about the solid waste one. Those requests at the bottom, are those additional trucks or just replacing older ones?
Those would be replacing older ones.
And can you tell me how the lease would work on the pumper truck?
Sure.
Is it like when
It's a
you lease
10-year,
a car?
it's a
or-
10-year
yeah.
lease. Once we're done with the lease, we own the vehicle.
Oh.
And a lot of our fire trucks are leased just simply because of the cost of those trucks. They're anywhere from $800,000 to $1.2 million.
Well, again, I think it's great to see this because this current administration, you all started here in 2017, and I think Mr. Osborne and I were here in 2018, and correct me if I'm wrong, but before that, like 2015, 14, 13, I just don't think there was much investment in upgrading vehicles, and so it's good we have a plan. We're spending money doing it, but it's good that we have a plan to do it.
Right.
Yeah, before it's an emergency situation. Yeah.
All right, before, next on our items are health insurance and full-time employee request. So full-time employee increases for fiscal year '24. This is what we have done this past year. We've had 4 VDOT reimbursed maintenance positions in Public Works. We have a solid waste director, the commissioner of revenue, and the treasurer have each added 1 person that has been paid for through the state. And so we had 7 position increases in fiscal year '24. So fiscal year '25, the requests from the departments, our police have requested 4 full-time and 2 part-time officers. That would be for downtown. Fire departments asked for 1 firefighter and an assistant fire chief. Streets and engineering have asked for a GIS and analyst. Building maintenance, we need an additional custodian. And then the community development, the planner is going to be replacing the transportation planner to a city planner. The city planner will then kind of take on the role of the transportation planner as well. So it'll kind of be a dual role for that position. We have hired for that position right now. We have someone that will be starting here a little bit later in the year, and they do have local government experience, and we're excited to have them on board. We've been without a city planner for a number of years now, probably 3 years, and it's time that we get a city planner back on staff. And then solid waste, we would eliminate the project manager position. That position, when we had a previous employee leave us recently, that will eliminate that position. All right, now health insurance. So this year we saw an 11% increase on our health insurance rates, which is significant based on the information we received. This is probably the highest rate increase in Southwest Virginia. Various things play into that as to why we have that 11% insurance increase, and it's unfortunate, but that's where we're at right now. So in order to have our health insurance rates for our employees and keep things relatively the same so that employees will not see a decrease in their check for the health insurance costs, the City of Bristol will increase our share 11% plus a small adjustment, and the employee share will increase a little less than 11%. So that estimated budget increase for the city is a total of $290,000. Currently, 82% of our employees are on our health insurance plans, and we have 4 plans that are offered. We have the Key Advantage 500 comprehensive plan. 49% of our employees take advantage of that. Key Advantage Preventative, 3% of our employees take advantage of that plan. Key Advantage Comprehensive, 43 of $1,000 deductible, 43% take advantage of that. And the Key Advantage 1000 Preventative, 4% of our employees are on that plan. 55% of our employees are on the single plan, 18% of our employees on the single plus one plan, and then the 27% of our employees are on the family plan. So how will this impact employees going forward? Per pay period, you can see the single plan will increase 27 cents for a total of 54 cents a month and annually of $6.48. Our single plus one plan per pay period will increase $20 per pay period at $41.24 per month for a total of $494.88 a year. And then the family plan will increase $28.75 per pay period, and per month it's $57.50 for a total of $690,000. I'll be remiss, I did not discuss the 3% salary increase of $535,000 that we are anticipating will be in the budget. And that salary increase, the reason that the health insurance rates are the way they are, some employees, if we did not give a salary increase or if we did not take on more of the responsibility for the employer-based piece of the health insurance, would have actually seen their paychecks decrease, and we did not want to have employees' paychecks decrease all because of health insurance rates. We are basing the 3% is what we're hearing based at the state level right now. We'll follow that. If the state implements a 2.5% raise, I would anticipate we would do the same, but we're going to attempt to follow whatever the state does. Any questions about full-time employees or the health insurance? Okay. So now we'll talk about department requests. These are requests that are over $10,000, and we will go through these fairly quickly. The Board of Real Estate Assessments and Equalization, professional services of $115,000. That is for the reassessment fees that we will be going through this year. City Treasurer, bank service charge of $77,000. IT, maintenance of computer and softwares, increase of $43,810. That is for increased costs primarily due to Microsoft. Operating supplies and equipment for IT, $58,700. That is for equipment rotation. Police Department, maintenance of machinery and equipment of $17,094. That is for software that the police department needs. It's an annual software for LexiPol, which is the software that they use in order to update current laws so that they know what they should and should not be doing. Police Department investigation studies and rewards of $15,000, along with special investigations of $15,000. Police Department repair parts and equipment of $10,000, and that's just what we're seeing on the increase of what it's costing to repair vehicles. Streets and engineering, professional services of $23,000. That is for a GIS data subscription that is required of GIS. Maintenance of building and property, $125,000. That is for paving streets that are ineligible to be paved with VDOT maintenance funds. Streets and engineering, again, $220,000. That is an ADA transition plan and traffic cameras. And then contract labor for Clear Creek Golf Course of $13,000. That's just the cost of what it's costing based on the increase of the minimum wage and having individuals help staff Clear Creek. Repair parts for the collection division of $35,000. That's just an increase of cost for what it's costing for parts for vehicles. And then, I've lost my space, disposal, other improvements in construction, $100,000, and that's maintenance for infrastructure in the landfill system for $100,000. So any questions about department requests? All right. So what's next? If y'all have any questions that we can't answer today, we'll get those back to you in a timely manner. We'll get you the answers back in a timely manner. We will continue to review revenues based on new data until we actually present the budget on April the 9th. This upcoming week, Ms. Spradlin and I will spend a significant portion of our week going through the budget and trying to get to zero. At this point, we're nowhere near close to zero, but we hope to be close to zero by the end of the week. And that's what we have next. So any comments, questions?
All right, thank you, Mr. Eads. That was a great presentation, and I appreciate the hard work and time you've put in to carefully come up with this budget this year. I know it's not been easy, and then also presenting the capital improvement plan. And I know it's you and our assistant city manager, Ms. Spradlin. So thank you all and the department heads that's put time into this. I'll open the floor. Does council have any questions?
I just have one question about the capital improvement plan, and maybe this would fit in the capital improvement plan, maybe it would fit somewhere else, but again, happy to see stuff with like Gene Malcolm Stadium, some stuff at Cumberland Square Park and Sugar Hollow. Something I was thinking about as we were sitting up here is some school buildings. As we get into later this year in August, we'll have a few empty school buildings. So Washington Lee, Highland View, Stonewall, and I guess we still have the old social services office as well. And I just think that's something maybe to keep in the back of our mind as far as figuring out, what's the highest and best use of those properties next. And maybe we're repurposing them and we're doing something else with them. Maybe we're selling some, maybe we're doing a little bit of both. But just thinking about that as we go into.
We actually have a draft for solicitations for those schools that we're in the process of reviewing. We anticipate those will probably go out within the next several weeks. We will be asking the public for their highest and best use for each of those schools, not necessarily the public, but anyone who wants to bid on those schools. Not only should they give us their highest and best use for the site, but give us their best prices to what they're willing to give us for that building.
That'll be good.
I'll jump in. So first off, thank you for the presentation. I think that, aside from that big boggling number of 32.2 million sitting on 2728, most things look pretty good. I have a question. If we go back, yes, to this slide. So one of for Streets and Engineering Division, maintenance of building and property, you said that would be for going out and fixing roads that are not covered through the VDOT maintenance.
Yes.
So one of my budget goals that I had submitted is implementing a process where we're able to go out and readily identify and fix as many potholes as we can, because there are a lot of neighborhoods that are barely passable at some points. So do you know offhand, or Ms. Spradlin might know offhand, what was the cost for those kind of projects last year? Because I know they're requesting 125 this year.
I don't know what that cost was, and Ms. Spradlin may be able to pull it up, but if I'm not mistaken, we usually have this in the budget every year to some degree. I'm not sure exactly what the cost was, because there are streets in the city that have to be paved that aren't covered with VDOT maintenance funds. The potholes, people do have the ability to go online and report the potholes to us when they do pop up. I have noticed throughout the city that when I do see potholes, usually within a few days, our staff gets out and gets those corrected. If we haven't, we need to be notified of where they're at so that we can get those taken care of as quickly as possible.
I think, maybe potholes is a misnomer. There's just some roads that, are in bad shape.
They did do an assessment of the roads. We had a company come in
Yeah.
last year and doing a complete assessment of the roads to tell us exactly which roads need to be paved in what year going forward. So we have had a reassessment of those roads done. Go ahead, Ms. Bradley.
In the current budget, there was 35,000 budgeted for repairs of this nature that are not covered by the VDOT funds, and that increase is to 160, the $125,000 increase. There's a significant amount of monies of VDOT available, so that's something that you could look at as well. Did that answer the question?
I think so.
I think it did, yeah. I mean, I think it would be very good. I know we have, we have the website, but we need, I think we really need to be more on top of it, maybe find a way to be more proactive. I know some cities use a 311 setup, and essentially that's what the website is, but nobody knows it's there. It's not as easy to access. But I mean, just for instance, on my drive down here, I go under the underpass on Columbia Street. It goes under the bridge there, and if you're going more than 10 miles an hour, you're going to jar the screws out of your car going under that bridge. So I mean, there are places that maybe they're not potholes, but just structurally the roads need work. So I'm glad to see that they're getting, or that they're requesting an increase, and hopefully they can implement those things throughout the city.
Specifically under that bridge, that's for safety purposes. We want to make sure that you're not going to run into one of the pillars there at the bridge and knock down the bridge. So.
Well, you're doing a great job with it so far.
Got the speed control device.
That is a Neil speed control device.
I want to say thank you all for the work on this. I know with our current situation that we've had for a little while now, that wasn't a look at you, I apologize. The current situation we've had has caused the budgets to be more difficult, harder to get that happy medium, but it's very promising to see so many good things still happening with the storm cloud looming over us, so I really appreciate that. I do have one question, kind of going along with the capital improvement plan, or parallel to that. In the past, the city has not had the full staffing that we've needed to do everything. There's several people doing several jobs. I know there were several requests in the budget for additional staffing, but is there some type of plan going forward for various departments that need those additional people, almost like a capital improvement plan for staffing over the next several years?
I think what we're seeing now, especially within Public Works, is just finding people willing to work. It's not necessarily that we don't have the positions available, because I think there's 2 or 3 positions that are currently available in Public Works that we cannot get filled. People, for whatever reason, are not willing to work. And it's just been very difficult for us to get some of these positions filled. For the most part, I think, I would probably love, in a perfect world, love to have another 50 people in Public Works to take care of all the grass and the mowing and the tree trimming and everything, and do the things that we need to city buildings. I think that would be ideal. 50 may be a little of exaggeration, but I would like to have more people within the Public Works Department. The situation we're in right now financially, I think we're going to have to do the best we can with what we have. And it's going to be that way for the next several years. I wish I could get up here. I haven't had one budget season yet where I can get up here and tell a council, give me your pet projects, let's make those things happen. We can do that in 2044 if y'all stick around. We can do all the pet projects. We'll have roughly an extra $7.5 million that we'll need to figure out how to spend in 2044.
Pass. I have a question back on the tax revenue that we're getting. So there was a, let's get back to it. Keep going. No, yep. So on restaurant, not on this one, but on the one that's just restaurant, there's a pretty big drop in restaurant meals tax. You know, I know we raised the tax, so what happened? Is it just, are the sales lower across the board?
Well, I think we've seen this in our financial quarterly reports. I would say the sales are almost flat, maybe a little bit less than what, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but the sales are not what we anticipated the sales to be this upcoming year. And that's why we're seeing lower numbers.
If I remember correctly, the sales tax went down slightly, and the meals tax went up, but only because we'd increased the rate, and net sales had gone down.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
And I think on whatever your local sales tax slide, that's what it shows also, right? The sales tax drops.
Yes. If I can find it. Yeah, decrease there.
If I remember correctly, the lodging, net sales went up, but meals went down.
On the new staffing requests, I know that, you know, obviously it is labeled as, you know, requests, and traditionally maybe we get more requests than we're able to fulfill. How close do you think we are to being able to fulfill those requests? Like,
Well-
how realistic are we on that?
Realistically, I think one thing that we have all heard about for a few years now is the downtown situation. At this point, my recommended budget does have 4 police officers and 2 part-time police officers in it at this point. As I said, Ms. Bradley and I are going to go through the budget this week to try to get to 0. Not sure where that will fall out at the end of the day, but it is a high priority. I know several of you had that same budget goal, and it's one of my priorities too. I think we're all tired of hearing about the situation downtown, and we need to do whatever we can to improve that situation as best we can. You know, the only other position on here right now, and it's not really adding a position, but it's just transferring from transportation planner to city planner. That's the only thing right now that's in the budget that I think of off the top of my head.
Is that intended to be an additional GIS analyst?
Yes.
In addition to filling the vacancy?
Yes,
Custodian.
and the custodian. Okay, the custodian's in there as well.
I would like to add to that the second line there, that additional firefighter would also, I think, play an important role in the downtown issue too, because they get called out on quite a few of those calls and have to deal with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And also to even out the staff at each fire department. And I think the police, adding those 4 full-time and 2 part-time for downtown is a high priority, just based on, in order for us to get our hands, or get some type of control downtown, and get a grip on it, I think we're gonna have to do something. There's gonna have to be more police presence down there. And we're getting to the point, just based on, after conversations with business owners and, you know, as we've all talked about it as well, I think it's so important if we can figure that out. I was the one who added in also the economic development director, because I'm thinking about the recruitment for the falls and other areas, and I know we have an economic development specialist that's working really hard on that and trying to fill those. But in working a lot with economic development and being involved in a lot of these organizations, I think it's really important in order for us to attract and get in more businesses that we do have that focus on economic development, because that's only going to be a return for our funds going into that, to have new businesses coming in and have those new revenues coming into the city. So just, I would like to look at that in some way. I don't know if it's still that same person and be a promotion, but to have a director of economic development, I think is super important with all that we have going on in the city.
Okay.
All right, anything else? I'm sure that once we look through this, and as we continue to work through this budget, we'll have more opportunities to discuss it. So thank you again for this presentation and the work that you all put into it. Again, I know it wasn't easy, so we appreciate your hard work on it.
Well, thank you. I do want to go ahead and forewarn you all, we typically go through the budget line item by line item and two-on-twos. So go ahead and start looking at your calendars for, I think, April 10th and 11th, those 2 days. I would anticipate we need about 3 hours for each session for us to go through those line items by line item, and we'll do that after the presentation of my budget.
All right. All right, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the only item on our agenda today, and we stand adjourned.